It was a cool morning when the sheriff knocked on my door, his face pale, like he was delivering bad news. I could tell something was wrong right away. He held a thick yellow envelope in his hand, his eyes unsure. "Sir, I hate to be the one to do this," he started, looking down at the papers in his hand. "But you're being sued by the HOA." I stared at him, blinking. Sued? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For what? He scratched the back of his neck, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "For painting the American flag on your barn." At first, I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. But the sheriff didn't laugh. His expression was dead serious. And that's when it hit me his wasn't a joke. My heart sank. I lived on a ranch, far from the typical suburban life. I wasn't even part of any HOA. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "They can't do this," I whispered to myself. "This has to be a mistake." But it wasn't. That moment, the moment when everything changed for me, marked the beginning of a battle that would consume my life. But what I didn't know then was just how far the HOA would go to silence me. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jack Lawson. I'm 48 years old, a widower, and a rancher. I live just outside of a small town in a place I inherited from my father, a patch of land that's been in my family for generations. It's 100 acres of wide open space, green fields, and the same red barn that's been standing for over 60 years. Life was peaceful, quiet. I raised cattle, grew hay, helped out my neighbors whenever I could. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. I had everything I wanted. A couple of years ago, I started rescuing horses. One of the first I took in was Daisy. She had been left to die in a ditch by the highway. My neighbor, Miss Patty, called me. She told me about the horse, and I didn't hesitate. I fixed up a stall, got her fed, and slowly, I watched her come back to life. Daisy reminded me what it meant to fight through hard times, and I never asked for anything in return. I'd always believed in doing the right thing. It's how I lived my life, and one of the things I'm proud of is my service in the Army. I served for 6 years and came home with scars both seen and unseen. But every morning, when I raised that American flag by my gate, I felt whole again. It gave me a sense of peace, of pride, and of duty. That peace, though, was shattered when I decided to do something special. My barn, the old one that had been there since my dad was around, was starting to peel. It needed a fresh coat of paint, so I thought, why not do something bold, something meaningful? I decided to paint the American flag on it, a tribute to my country, my service, and the land that had been passed down to me. The flag took me 3 weeks to paint. Every morning, I'd paint a little, feed the animals, and then paint a little more. The flag was bold red stripes, crisp white lines, and a field of 50 stars. I poured my heart into it. People who drove by started honking their horns, while VYing, even stopping to thank me. A few veterans left flowers by the gate. One left his bronze star, which I nailed above the barn door. But not everyone was happy. 2 weeks after I finished, I noticed a fancy black SUV driving slowly past my property. At first, I thought it was a tourist or maybe someone interested in buying hay. But they didn't stop, they just circled back and drove off. Then it happened again, and again. Eventually, I got a knock at my gate. It was a man and a woman, both dressed like they were headed to a courtroom. The man had a briefcase. The woman had a clipboard. "Good morning, sir," the man said, squinting at the barn. "We're with the Hillside Acres Homeowners Association." I furrowed my brow. "I don't live in Hillside Acres." "You fall within the greater boundary of the community extension," he said, flipping through some papers. "We've recently adopted a policy that includes properties adjacent to the subdivision." I shook my head. "But this is private land. Been in my family since 1962. We've never been part of any HOA." The woman gave me a tight smile. "That may be so, but the property lines have been under review." She flipped through her papers. "We're here to discuss the unauthorized mural," she said, pointing to my barn. "It violates community aesthetic guidelines. We'll need you to paint over it." I stared at them, stunned. You want me to paint over the American flag? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's nothing personal, the man said. Just policy. Good luck with that, I told them. They left without another word, but I thought that was the end of it. Just some HOA busybodies trying to scare me. But it wasn't the end. 2 months later, I received those lawsuit papers from the sheriff. That's when I realized they weren't messing around. They weren't just mad about a flag. They were trying to take control of my land. They were claiming I was part of a neighborhood I'd never agreed to, in violation of rules I'd never even heard of. Fines started coming in. At first, it was due law 500, then due law 1,200, then due law 3,000. Letters came in every week, some hand-delivered by the same 2 people from the HOA. I refused to respond. That's when I hired Tina Mendoza, a lawyer who didn't back down. She told me they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but they didn't care. They started a smear campaign, calling me a danger to the community, a provocateur, and even claiming I was storing dangerous chemicals in my barn. It didn't stop there. Miss Patty called me one night, crying. Someone had put flyers in her mailbox warning people not to engage with me. Then my tractor tires were slashed. My mailbox was smashed. My water line was tampered with. It was getting worse fast, and I tried to keep my head up. I reminded myself of what my dad used to say, when the world turns mean, you turn kind. Show them you're stronger. But then came the fire. I heard Daisy scream in the middle of the night, something horses only do when they're terrified. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the barn. What I saw made my blood run cold. The American flag on the side of my barn was burning. The flames climbed fast, licking across the paint like hungry teeth. I tried to get the fire out, but it was already doing damage. And that's when I realized it wasn't just about a flag anymore. They were trying to destroy me. I called the sheriff the next morning, but I knew how this would go. The HOA had friends in high places. The same sheriff who handed me the lawsuit papers looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to help, but didn't know how deep this mess really went. He promised to look into it, but warned me to be careful. Things were escalating. So I did what I could. I installed cameras around my property, infrared motion sensors, the works. I wasn't rich, but I sold some scrap metal, traded an old ATV, and got the best gear I could find. I moved Daisy to a smaller shed near the house, where I could keep an eye on her. I patched up the barn with fresh wood, levying the burn marks as battle scars, and repainted the flag bigger, bolder, brighter. Then came the legal blow. The HOA filed an emergency motion in court to force me to paint over the flag until the case was resolved. They claimed it was causing emotional distress, that it was a disruption to visual harmony. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just about some HOA rules. It was personal. I wasn't going to back down. Tina worked tirelessly to gather statements, even contacting local news. Kyle, a journalist from Channel 4, came out to interview me. Miss Patty spoke out in my defense. The story went viral. People from all over the state reached out to support me, some offering donations for my legal fund. It felt like I wasn't alone anymore. But the fight wasn't over. 3 days before the hearing, I got a certified letter from the county notice of a zoning violation. They claimed the mural violated agricultural zoning codes. They threatened fines, demolition orders. This was getting ridiculous. The next blow came when I received a letter from the county notice of eminent domain reviewed. They were evaluating my property for repurposing as part of a community expansion project. The HOA had worked with the county to annex several properties, starting with mine. They weren't just trying to silence me. They were trying to take everything I had. That's when Frank Dillard, a local man who used to live on my land, came by with some old land records. It turns out, my property was exempt from any future neighborhood developments or HOA regulations. We had proof now. Real legal proof. With the new EVY Tina filed a motion to block the annexation. The case went to court, and after all the delays, the judge ruled in my favor. The HOA's actions were dismissed as harassment and overreach. But outside the courthouse, Marcy Kent, the HOA president, walked past me with a smug look on her face. She didn't say a word, but her eyes said it all. This wasn't over. The next day, I got a knock on my door from a man in a dark suit. "We're opening an investigation into the Hillside Acres HOA," he said. "We may need you to testify in a criminal case." I stood there stunned. Everything I'd been through it was just the beginning. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Because I knew I'd won.